Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Anastasia Sprimuli. I am the Director of Graduate Admissions here at Bay Path University. And tonight's hot topic is Movement Breaks for Education with Dr. Donna Smith, as she illustrates the visual role occupational therapy practitioners can play in movement break training for teachers. With over 20 years of experience in providing sensory-focused early intervention services and supporting children ages 3 through 21 in a school-based setting, Dr. Smith brings a brain-based perspective on the benefits of movement breaks in a classroom. Throughout the presentation, feel free to submit your questions via chat that's included on your GoToWebinar, and we will also have time for a Q&A at the end. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Smith.
Hi, thank you, Anastasia. So I just want to warn you, my cat is trying to come over, so we might have a little visitor. But I want to thank everyone for being here and taking the time to learn about this growing practice of movement breaks in the classroom. This presentation is based on information from a research project called Movement Breaks for Education, a continuing education course for elementary school teachers. I'm Donna Smith, as I was introduced as. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist working for over 20 years in pediatrics with children from birth through age of 21 years of age. I've been in my current school district for about 15 years and have been doing early intervention with focus on sensory strategies for families across my whole OT career. My pre-OT career was in school psychology. The almost decade of school psychology experience that I had led me to supporting persons with traumatic brain injury in multiple roles, including assessment, cognitive rehabilitation, counseling, and behavioral consultations. Now, these combined experiences facilitated a strong interest in practice in neurobehavioral connections. So that has really led me to being very interested in sensory practice. All right, so for the next hour, we are going to review the research project. I will share some of the course content provided to the research participants. I will summarize, and then I'll take some questions. But I'd first like to tell you the story behind the reason this project was created. So in the real world, and we can see it all around us, children and adults spend more time inside on devices. Where children are not getting the physical movement they need for healthy development. And the World Health Organization put out some guidelines to recommend more physical movement for children and adults across the world. Now, based on my 23 years of experience and my professional school-based observations, I noticed a lack of movement that children and people were getting. The children were carrying it over into the classroom. There was an increase in disruptive movement and behaviors. So at my schools, I receive a lot of screen requests from teachers for help with students who are moving too much with disruptive results in the classroom. And so towards an effort to stay current on the research, evidence-based practices regarding movement breaks, I learned that teachers were not feeling confident and effectual in using them in the classroom. So the research project was designed to investigate if spending my already strained professional time exploring the recent research for movement break tools and physical input, and then time spent in the role as a resource for the teachers would help the teachers understand the reasons for the activities. Will they be able to target specific goals for the movement breaks, as opposed to the feedback I often get was, oh, what you're saying is to help them get their wiggles out. So I was hoping to find out if the information that I shared with them would help them feel more confident in movement breaks and feel more comfortable in using the movement breaks with a curated purpose, as opposed to just trying to help them get the wiggles out. too far. Here we go. So this project builds on the literature that tells us that teachers see the value of movement breaks. Some are taking the time from instruction to give the students movement opportunities, yet they're reporting a lack of comfort and a lack of skill regarding the application. There is not a lot of training happening in regards to movement breaks. In 2019, a national study found that only 37% of the teachers had training in movement breaks, despite wanting training. And we know that when supported by training, teachers use movement breaks twice as often. But it's really unknown if that training improved their feelings of comfort and confidence. Sorry, we're having some slide issues. So the purpose of this project was to fill that information gap. And the hope was to provide guidance to OTs by exploring if an occupational therapist-led training in movement breaks for teachers would increase their comfort and confidence level with this tool, and hence be an effective use of time for school-based OTs. The underlying purposes include providing evidence for school-based OTs to spend their time supporting teachers with this information, if it's a good use of their already strapped time, and to find if that training helps the teachers and facilitates a rationale for school administrators to provide funding for training. So my project was based on a 6-hour in-person continuing education course held during a region-wide public school professional day. So there were multiple schools from across the region, different school districts. The course was one of approximately 50 options offered to the teachers, and each teacher was sent a catalog of course options with descriptive information, and the objectives of each course was shared, and then they signed up for what they wanted. 3 sets of data were collected. All 17 participants completed a pre-course and post-course test. Both tests had the same 10 multiple choice questions, which were completed before the course and then after, to see how much each participant learned. And then there was an evaluation survey, which was collecting demographic information. And then there was a course evaluation that had 7 Likert scale questions about the course itself, such as, was the course organized? Was the instructor knowledgeable? Were the handouts and the references applicable? And then there was some open-ended questions to obtain personalized responses to questions, eliciting information as to how the participants experienced the course and how they felt about using movement breaks after the course. All right, so then I emailed a second survey 30 days after the course. It was a Google survey that they filled out anonymously. And by the way, everything collected was anonymous. 9 participants responded. There were 3 Likert scale questions, which asked what their feelings were about their confidence levels in now understanding, choosing, and implementing movement breaks at 30 days after the course. There were also 3 open-ended questions to allow the participants, again, to use their own words, to explain if the course effectively improved their feelings, confidence in regard to movement breaks, and applying movement breaks during the academic day 30 days later. Okay. So of the demographic data collected, we look for any patterns that surfaced that may have influenced the results. So in this sample, 16 of the 17 participants identified as female, which may be a typical elementary school teacher gender pattern. There were no patterns suggested in age or years of experience. Of the teaching roles reported, 8 were general education teachers, and the balance was almost evenly split between general education teachers in inclusive classrooms and subject specialists. So there was no pattern suggested there. There was a suggested pattern that participants were already invested in physical movement, as all but one participant indicated that they had already used movement breaks with their students this year, and 14 reported that they engaged weekly in their own personal exercise, both of which may have been motivating, may have been a motivating component for not only enrollment for the course, but their attention to the course and for the information learning, therefore resulting in an increased knowledge level, as evidenced by the growth between the pre-test and the post-test scores, which we'll see on the next slide. So the results of the paired t-test, comparing the means of the pre and the post-test for the size of the growth between them, indicated a statistically strong outcome. And a significant p-value of 0.001325 suggests that the study provides sufficient evidence to conclude that the observed difference in between the means is significant and unlikely to be due to random chance. Both of these analysis suggest that the course effectively increased participants' knowledge of the benefits of movement breaks during the academic day. So the course evaluation that was completed immediately from its 7 Likert scale questions, most participants agreed that the course was organized, structured, the course materials were appropriate and supported learning, and the instructor was knowledgeable. Approximately 88% of the participants agreed that they felt better informed on movement breaks. 2 participants reported feeling neutral about being more informed. Some themes from the open-ended questions revealed that 76% reported feeling more confident about choosing movement breaks, and about 70% noted that this was based on volume of information. One said that the course was very informative and that I learned a lot about children's bodies and how they work. And another elaborated with, I feel better about trying different types of movement breaks beyond the YouTube. 6 participants wanted more movement break samples, and 4 wanted more peer collaborations. After 30 days, I sent out the post-course survey. And on the Likert scales, 88% agreed with feeling more confident in understanding the benefits of movement breaks. 66% agreed that they felt more competent and confident in choosing and using movement breaks. And 33% indicated a neutral level for feeling more confident in choosing and implementing movement breaks. Themes found in the open answer questions were tabulated, and 78% indicated that the course impacted their confidence in understanding the benefits of movement breaks, with a causation theme due to increased understanding. One participant noted that this course helped me to understand the science behind movement breaks and how beneficial they are to students and their learning. 67% indicated that the course impacted and improved their confidence in choosing specific movement breaks due to the theme of specific information. One verbatim example was, this course helped me identify productive movement breaks, not just breaks to move and run around the room. And one participant indicated that the course had no impact on their level of confidence. Okay, so in summary, there was a significant change in the pre-post test scores, indicating that the teachers gained knowledge from the course. The overall feedback about the course experience was positive. Participants reported knowing more about movement breaks after the course and felt more confident in choosing specific movement breaks to use in their class. So these results suggest that an OT-provided course on movement breaks does improve teachers' feelings of efficacy in choosing and applying movement breaks for their students during the academic day. In addition, participants were asked for recommendations to improve the course itself, and the two highest frequency suggestions were to include more movement experiences and to facilitate more peer collaborations across the room. All right, so I did want to mention that there were two frameworks that I used to help um, create the content of the course and the course itself. One was called the Do Live Well framework. It draws on the teacher's choices and routines as a mean to achieve overall health. The framework underscores how the teachers, who were the participants, how do they spend their time? What do they prioritize? And this is where the participants' personal interest in exercise fit well with this framework. Clinical reasoning and process underlying teacher transfer skills framework was also used. And this was used as a foundational structure to facilitate participant skill learning. It highlights the knowledge and experience of the course presenter, which was myself. And this framework expects the presenter to respond to the reactions of the participants during the course and make modifications to the teaching approach, which I did do during the course as I was having the participants engage in movement break experiences. I had them follow along with some videos and actually do the movement breaks. I noticed after lunch, there seemed to be less participation and more just watching. So I cut those videos short because I noticed that they were tired or they were having, a little break after lunch digesting. So I shortened them a little bit. All right, so some strengths of this study include the literature told us that the teachers wanted training, so this study met teachers' desire for information and training on movement breaks for free at no cost to the teachers. There was a large amount of information shared, all focused on the physicality and from different disciplines. Participants viewed the presented movement break activities as easily applied, focused, realistic, and ready for in-class use. Some limitations of the study included it was a small sample size. About 25 people signed up for the class, but the focus was on elementary school teachers, so I could only include those participants. And there were several people outside of that category, including a CODA, some classroom aides, and an ABA provider. So I couldn't include them in the data. The low number of participants makes it less reliable to generalize to the larger teaching population. The participants were also from the same small geographic region, and there was little diversity within the group across multiple areas, including race and gender. And in addition, most participants were already invested in the concept of physical movement. They were both professionally and personally already using movement breaks, which again may make it less transferable to the larger population. So in conclusion, we know that teachers like the effects of movement breaks and that that has on their students, but they are lacking confidence in choosing and using movement breaks in the classroom. This study highlights the positive effects school-based occupational therapists have when they provide teachers with information about movement breaks. The study demonstrates how OTs can improve teachers' feelings of confidence and effectualness in implementing this tool by providing teachers with this information and training. And I would like to highlight that cross-discipline research informs us that movement breaks help students in so many ways, in mental health, in attention, and in cognitive abilities. So with that, this shared information can create better learning environments for all students and directly increase the impact that school-based occupational therapists can have for both teachers and their students. So acting as a resource for teachers on movement breaks does support teachers' confidence in choosing and using this tool with their students. So next, we're going to start looking at the content of the course itself. So in the course, we talked about what are movement breaks? We defined them. We also talked about the different kinds of movement breaks. A lot of people use Go Noodle videos. They include physical movement, but we talked about what kind of movement are these videos bringing in. You know, what kind of movement are the teachers choosing? Aerobic versus resistance. Is it free movement or a specific motor plan? And what kind of sensory input does that movement provide? Is it vestibular, proprioceptive, tactile? And we talked about all these things in the course and educated the teachers on what some of these different inputs can do for students. And then we talked specifically about what movement breaks can do for students based on government agencies, what they're saying, and what some other teachers are saying about the movement breaks, and what some current research is saying about movement breaks. And then we spent some time on other online resources for movement break information. There are multiple things online: Active Schools, Healthy Schools, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. There are CEU programs that are free and asynchronous for teachers to take to get that information. And there's yoga training for teachers who want to provide yoga activities for their students. So we kind of reviewed some of those, but right now we're going to dig a little deeper into some of that information. So a variety of resources, including research articles, provide definitions of movement breaks. Some defined it generally as any short bout of physical activity during the academics in the classroom. They can be quick, easy, short duration of time. They can be goal-oriented. A teacher can consider what effect is wanted for the students. Do they want to increase attention? Do they want to decrease anxiety? Do they want to wake up their frontal lobes? They can consider these goals as one of the concepts to guide their choice of movement breaks. And this information also guides the research as researchers are exploring for a better understanding of how movement breaks can help the students be better learners. Some references noted the definition of movement breaks to be any incidence of health promoting engagement or movement. I just wanted to note that movement breaks are not physical education. Right? Physical education is focused on academic teaching of skills and outcomes, that the student is learning specific skills for mastery. So that's what phys ed is. Movement breaks are actually just the movement breaks during classroom time. One of the definitions from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention is decreasing the amount of sedentary time. This is an alternative perspective with the same general end goal of increasing activity, but it highlights the opposite perspective. Movement breaks seem to have grown out of an overall health and wellness goal to decrease sedentary time and to help students reach that 30 minutes, that hour worth of activity per day by using 30 minutes of the day through movement breaks in the classroom to get that overall goal of movement for overall wellness and to decrease levels of obesity in students. Movement breaks have also been characterized as organized, weight-bearing, rhythmic. It can include music or metronome. It can be facilitated by rhythmic components. Okay, so some movement break categories. Different movement breaks provide different inputs to the body with different effects. We can curate our movement breaks towards specific effects, such as one category is restlessness and attention. I don't know if you remember what I said about the excessive in-class movement and behaviors. This is structured movement breaks. Movement breaks can help convert time that teachers need to take to redirect students from this disruptive behavior and movement, their restlessness, to redirect them back to learning. So using that time to do movement breaks can decrease the amount of redirection that teachers have to provide. There are targeted learning objectives You can increase learning with the goal effects of calming, brain stimulation, reading. Specific movements can facilitate these outcomes. And then there's also integrating learning, teaching a subject within a movement activity. Information on movement breaks come in various forms. There's a lot of growing research on it. There are books, there are online resources, as we're going to revisit again. But I did find one online that I'm going to share with you. I found it on a school district's website, and it is free and it is downloadable. And what I did was I downloaded it and printed it out and made copies and gave to everyone who was a participant in the project. This is called ABC for Fitness, the teacher manual. I found it in the Pittsfield Wellness Policy. It is from 2008. It's a school physical activity program for elementary school students. It teaches various ways to use movement breaks. The mission, it states, is to provide a fun, simple, engaging, no-cost, effective program that encourages physical activity in the classroom. So by breaking physical activity into short sessions or activity bursts, as they refer to them, it enables most children to accumulate that 30 minutes of physical activity each day at school, which I just mentioned. And the goal of this booklet was to decrease weight issues and obesity. And that was the goal of this booklet when it was made. Okay, so here's just some examples from this booklet. Because of our limited time, we're not going to do any movement break experientials, but I'm going to just share with you some of the movement breaks that I did have the teachers, participants in the project do. So this is one example from the booklet. It's called the Wiggles, and the students were asked to jog in place, then wiggle their fingers, and add their wrists, then their forearms, and to keep jogging while they're doing all this movement. And so that is just one example of a movement break that was just really based on movement, just to decrease restlessness. And here are two examples of integrating learning into a movement break. So learning experiences built into the movement. There's a sentence activity burst or a geography lesson. And after the course, a few months later, I had a new teacher come into one of my schools, and she was interested in learning. You know, she had some students who were very, very active, and she wanted some help with some of the students. So we talked about integrating that actual lesson right into a movement break. And she was a reading teacher. So she broke up a sentence by writing down each word in the sentence on a different index card and put those index cards in different locations in the room. And she had the students go and get them. She had to move across the room, go and get them, and bring them back, and then formulate that sentence in the space. And she found that was very, very helpful. Okay, so then with the participants, we talked about what's some of the physiological changes that happen for students based on research with these movement breaks. And so the researchers are really looking at different movement break types with different doses, different durations, and different intensities of movements. And these different researchers have found that there are multiple possible physiological outcomes that may improve neuroplasticity and enhance information processing capacity through a variety of mechanisms. There were brain anatomy structure changes. There were increased size of brain areas, for example, the hippocampus and memory, different levels of increased blood flow to the brain. They talked about how it brought more oxygen and energy for use for the brain. There were neurotransmitter releases, such as in sensory integration activities. There was neuronal growth. Neuronal pathways were being created. And there's the secretion of BDNFs, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factors that help axonal growth and differentiation between neurons. So it really, really helps the body and the brain learn. And then we talked about specific children-based benefits. And this information was based on the US Department of Health and Human Services in 2024, based on the research that they accumulated. So children ages 3 through 17 years of age showed improved general health, bone health, and weight control, helping fight obesity again. Ages 6 to 13 years, they showed improved cognition. We're going to look at some specific studies that talk about some of these specific movements. It also reduces depression for that age group. Ages 6 to 17 years old, it also includes cardiorespiratory function, cardiometabolic function. It improves muscular fitness. And there are some short-term benefits, such as it improves sleep and it reduces anxiety in this age group as well. Okay. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention started to promote the use of movement breaks and cited benefits specifically for students. So these category areas are outcomes that also guide further research. So they said that classroom behavior was improved, participation in the learning process was improved, there was more motivation, more focus, and more attention, and that the students were more active and better learners, which created healthier communities and well-being. So they included lap pads and weighted items. I included them in the participants to use and experience them because we connected them to sensory input, because that's one of the things that we often talk about with our students to try to help them settle. And so in the class, the participants had access to the lap pads and the weighted items, and we talked about them. I wanted the teachers to get an idea of how they feel, and talked about the benefits of some of those tools. All right, and then we talked about some programs that were created to explore movement breaks. For example, the state of Massachusetts collaborated with the Choices Learning Collaborative Partnership from Harvard University. They put together a plan for Boston, as well as for this statewide program for Massachusetts. The initial target, again, was for health and overall wellness, a healthy weight to combat obesity. And they studied the students and the overweight issue, and they found that 1/3 of first graders in Boston were found to be overweight or obese. So the experts in this program suggested that schools provide opportunities for classroom-based physical activity, but they found that as few schools offered it. And then in March 2023, they followed up and they found that 1/4 of the students were meeting the physical activity recommendations, even after recommendations were made to the World Health Organization's framework, 2018-2030. So the program was really recommending that regular physical activity can boost brain health, including improved cognition, reduce symptoms of depression, and they found that students who were physically active also tended to have grades, better attendance at school, and stronger muscles and bones. So that was one of the projects that was happening that we talked about. And this same program made some teacher guideline recommendations. It talked about how teachers reported that they were enjoying leading the movement breaks. Teachers said when they participated in the breaks, they also experienced the health benefits. The program recommended some guidelines, including the teachers being consistent with the days and times that they do the movement breaks, that they modify the activities to allow all students to participate in the movement breaks. They also recommended that teachers have the students take deep breaths after the movement break to help students transition to the next activity. They also recommended that teachers explain the benefits of moving during the school day so that the students would have a better understanding of the purpose of the movement and then be educated on the benefits that movement brings. Okay, and then in the content of the course, we also talked about students with disabilities. The federal law requires that schools provide students with and without disabilities equal opportunities to participate in physical education and physical activities. So we watched this video and we talked about it a little bit. There was something else we covered. And there's that video right there. And then we reviewed some research that's out there. Um, so one of the areas that some researchers are looking at are general education students. For example, Broad et al. In 2023, they looked at the general education population. They looked at classroom activity breaks at different times within the school day and compared that to on-task behavior and physical activity levels in primary school grades 1 through 3. And what they used was a Tabata format of 20 seconds of high intensity exercise, followed by 10 seconds of rest for a total of 4 minutes. And then they compared the two different time frameworks. And what they found were positive outcomes. There was more on task behavior retention, students sustained physical activity levels, to be more active elsewhere in their day. And the authors calculated that if a teacher utilized 4 minutes to perform a movement break, students will demonstrate a more significant percentage of on-task learning time than without the movement breaks. It decreases the amount of redirection and refocus that we talked about before that teachers would have to give to students. So if they spent that time, those researchers were saying if they spent that time doing the movement breaks, they would have to do that less redirection. And so another researcher had looked at the Tabata format as well. This was in 2015, and they used a tool called Funtervals, which is the same idea, 4-minute Tabata format. But they included in their conclusions that they found that these types of movement breaks were time efficient, they were easy to implement, and it improved selective attention in 9 to 11-year-olds. So on this slide here, we are going to watch a video. Here we go. So we're going to watch a little bit of this. I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. I cannot hear it. Let's see if there's something I can do with this. So we won't listen to it, but I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. I cannot hear it. But he is talking about the story of popcorn and how they're gathering popcorn. They're taking it off the shelf right now. And it's the idea of these funtervals is to create a story and then infuse different movements with this. So now he's going to have them do a different action. Before they were taking popcorn off the shelf and putting in the popcorn maker, and now they're being the popcorn and they're actually jumping up and down and acting as the popcorn. And so they'll do this for a little bit, and they'll do several motions through that just to get the different activities in. And while the participants were watching this video, I asked them to think about some adaptations they could do for the students. You know, what would they do, or how would they modify it if a student had poor motor planning? What would they do if there was a student who didn't understand the verbal directions or was confused by it? So I just wanted the participants to think a little bit about how they could modify these activities for their students. Okay, and here's another video. I'm not going to play it because I'm not so sure. Let's see if you guys can hear it. I think I will let you guys watch it just for a minute. This is maybe a more modern one. Sorry. Know where that commercial's taking us. I'll tell you what, we're gonna just skip that one. But it's like a video game. They infuse the students into the video game. Oh, there we go. It looks like it's popping up. I think Anastasia might have helped me. So this is a more modern one. It's for like the students to pretend they're in the video game. And again, I'm not sure if you can hear it. I cannot, but they start off by running, and then there's these objects that come. They have to jump over or duck under. And so I again asked the teachers to think about what the different movements in here might give to the students. We have a little vestibular input going on by the ducking and the head movement. There's a little spinning going on, some more vestibular input, some proprioception by the running and the jumping. And we talked about some of these things. I'm going to stop it. And I'm down to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so those are just some examples of movement breaks that use different kind of movements that come from some different videos that have a Tabata format. So now we're going to look at some studies that actually worked with the children who were at risk or were diagnosed with ADHD. So Russell et al., 2017, they looked at very young students at risk for developing ADHD and provided them with aerobics activities in short stints of running. The participants ran back and forth at a specified pace, and then they were encouraged to run quicker and quicker across a 15-meter area. Not necessarily something you do as a movement break in the classroom, but the idea was to see if this kind of movement did help students. And after this movement, they did show improvement in impulse control via a flanker test. A flanker test is a cognitive test which assesses a person's ability to suppress inappropriate responses when they are asked to focus on a target. So the authors concluded that a fitness cognition link appears in young childhood that seems helpful for those in the early school years with an ADHD risk. Chan et al. In 2022, they looked at students diagnosed with ADHD, and they looked at regular exercise and acute short bursts of movement breaks with looking at the frontal lobe function and motor skills. And the authors surmised that aerobic engagements may increase neurotransmitter production, such as serotonin, dopamine, BDNF, and the brain blood flow. And they recommended moderate to high intensity interval bouts to serve as complementary treatment for ADHD. And acute movement breaks, they concluded, were beneficial with accumulation across time. And then in 2013, the children were diagnosed with ADHD participated in a single bout physical activity. And so what they found here is that these students showed a greater performance in the areas of reading and arithmetic, and they were found to benefit from single bouts of moderately intense aerobic exercise, as they have a positive effect on the aspects of the neurocognitive function in inhibitory, that impulse control in children with ADHD. So they did find that these movements, these quick, short bouts of movement, really did help them with impulse control. So I shared some of this information with the teachers. I just wanted to think and consider about some of the movement breaks that they were choosing. We talked about some yoga-based movement breaks. I thought this was interesting. I pulled this out just for you guys to focus on it, this tool called Madras, it's really just finger squeezing. Um, you can have a child squeeze a finger with one hand, and it can affect your mental state. I just thought this was interesting. If you hold the finger, one finger at a time for 3 to 5 minutes, it'll affect your mental state. You only have to do one hand, but if you have time to do both, you can do both. But if you held the thumb, it would help decrease worry. If you held the index finger, it would decrease fear. If you held the middle finger, it would decrease anger. I just thought that was interesting, and I thought that I would share that with you guys. And it was one of the things that I shared with the participants. And then here is a resource for to find more information on those modules. Okay, and then for the content of the course, I talked about Little Flower Yoga. They put together a list of recommendations for teachers to follow when they're teaching yoga to children. A teacher is recommended to let go of any preconceived position expectations, allow the child choices to guide the pace, repetition, to use novel positions as needed. And they encourage teachers to have positions in their mind for, to target, but to let go of those stringent positioning elements as maybe a yoga teacher they might correct your positioning. But with children, they recommend letting the children kind of use their own formations as they need. We also talked about some neuromotor immaturity and what effects it might have on children in learning. We talked a little bit about primitive reflexes. And then we talked about how, oh, sorry, we talked about some neuromotor enhancing movements. So there are specific movements that help encourage specific primitive reflexes integrate, and some of these reflexes help. These reflex exercises can help the nervous system overcome some of these reflexes that are in our body or that are retained. So there's also specific movements, such as are taught in Brain Gym, that can help facilitate learning through these neuromotor functional enhancements and can affect academic learning. So we talked a little bit about Brain Gym, and we talked a little bit about that. All right, so we spent some time on Brain Gym. It's described as movement-based learning. It builds learning potential by developing large and small muscle motor skills that facilitate thinking tools. There are 4 Brain Gym categories: energy exercises, deepening attitudes, lengthening activities, and midline movements. I talked about that with the teachers, and I had them do some Brain Gym activities. Okay, and then we reviewed some research. Recent research, Brain Gym has been around a very long time, but there is some recent research on it in 2024. These researchers found that Brain Gym training had a positive effect on academic performance, which encompassed numeracy, literacy, and spelling. And then there was another one done in 2023, and they did a pre and a post-test study, including 90 students, 45 in the experimental and 45 in the control group. And the results indicated that Brain Gym had a significant effect on overall learning in those groups. And then this next slide has got a video, a Brain Gym video on it. There it is. I think maybe we'll just skip that and go to the want to move back. Sorry, we're having slide issues here. Let's see. Okay, well, I guess we'll stick with that one. So during the content of the class, I would have them do some different movement experiences, and then I would have them turn and talk. I wanted them to reflect on the experience itself. How did it feel physically? Did they feel any benefits? Did they have any emotional reactions to it? I asked them to break up into groups. And one of the things I learned from the feedback from the teachers is that they would have liked to have more interaction with teachers from across the room. So what I would recommend if you ever do a course like this is people come into groups and they sit with the people they know. And so they talk and they share reflections with the people they know. So I would recommend having the groupings of people sitting together, count off to 3 or 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then have all the ones get together and the twos get together, etc., so that you can pull people from across the room so they can interact with each other across the room. Because I found that the teachers didn't necessarily do that freely, even though they were offered the opportunity. So I just recommend that. Okay, so there we go. And so then we went through some online movement break resources. We talked about 7 here. All of them were free, but some of them had some payment aspects that one could choose if they wanted. There was Active Schools Research Alliance. There was a Kidding Around Yoga, which is an online yoga for students, teacher training. There were some trainings by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And there were some other ones. We're going to dig into some particular ones a little bit more. So here's the link information for the teacher training about yoga on the top there. But another training listed on the bottom is the Active Schools Research Alliance. And I really liked this resource because it gave quick access to knowledge and prefabricated activity plans. It offered free professional development. Teachers could earn 18 hours of free CEUs of 6 modules that was self-paced. And they could do it across 6 to 18 weeks. And they could earn those CEUs on their own that way. Put us down here. Okay. And then the CDC also offered some trainings online. Having some slide issues. There we go. And so this one in particular, I'm not sure why it keeps doing that. I apologize. Hopefully it's going to stay right there. So the CDC offered some training, and this was really physical education based, but they also really got into in-class movement break options. And it really had a community-based approach. It encouraged staff to be involved in the physical activity, family and community engagement, and physical programs before and after school. It was just a very comprehensive framework of movement. So I really kind of like that. As I've shared that, that was one area that we talked about in the content of the course. And then there's the Healthy Schools Tools for Teachers. I really like this one as well. It included tools to help students make healthier choices like foods. It had graphic comic books for grades 4 to 8. It provided national guidance, and it had applicable strategies and resources for integration. So we talked about that one. And so what I included here are the references that I used in my course content. So everything that I talked about today is in this list of references plus other ones. And here's another page of my references. And there's another page. There's three pages of references. And then this very last page was the references used today. And that is the end of my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for sharing your expertise. For questions, do please feel free to type them into the question box provided with your GoToWebinar. And you're more than welcome to, I am going to provide some contact information as well. But while you're thinking of questions, if you do have any, I just wanted to chat a little bit about what BayPath offers in terms of programs. And we have 4 OT-based programs. We have a full-time MOT program that's fully on campus. We have a part-time MOT program that is part of our hybrid program. And then we also have a bridge program that's designed for OTAs and PTAs. That is a part-time program as well. And lastly, we have our post-professional OTD program as well. That's 100% online. This is some of the contact information for our program director, Dr. Julie Watson, myself for the graduate admissions, our presenter, Dr. Smith. So if you do have any questions, if you don't think of any questions now, think of something later, feel free to reach out to her. I'm sure she's going to be more than happy to chat with you. Our program director for the OT programs is Dr. Tracy Bentley Root. Our OT admissions, that's not OTD, is Julia. And then lastly, we do have a wonderful OTD graduate assistant, Latasha. So if you ever wanted to chat with somebody who's in the OTD program, she would be a great resource as well to contact. All right, looks like one question came in. It says, great presentation, Donna. I'm sorry if I missed this, but did they recommend a daily amount of movement per school day, especially related to recess?
So I didn't share the recommendations for daily input, but yes, they hope that children get like an hour of activity a day, and they were hoping to supplement that by having at least 30 minutes during the day at school with these movement breaks. And recess is very, very important. Children need to get out and get that movement in. I don't know if that answers your question.
All right, I don't see any more questions. So again, for any questions, please refer to the contact information provided. We will be sending out a copy of this recording and the presentation, so you will can go back and look at this. But you can also connect with us on social media, and we just appreciate you joining us tonight. And look forward to seeing you at our future events at BayPath University. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Donna, thank you so much for being here and doing the presentation.
Thank you.